Welcome, everybody. Thank you so much for joining us on the Reinvention virtual chat and the Power of Reinvention podcast. I'm absolutely thrilled to have Shirley Hughes as my guest today on the show. My special, amazing, and dear friend who is just one of the most brilliant young minds of our business and our industry. So I'm really excited to share a conversation with you today that many of us are having at the moment in the workplace. And whether we're entrepreneurs, mid-level managers, senior managers, entry-level employees, this is such a relevant time and space to be having this conversation about leadership, corporate culture, really kind of how we're all doing in this kind of new era of the workspace. And we're also going to talk about some other non-work related stuff, because how could we not? So for those of us who don't know Shirley, let me just give you a little bit of background. Shirley Hughes is the president of the brand marketing division at Rogers & Cowan PMK. She is a senior executive with over 20 plus years of experience and exceptional record of driving successful and innovative marketing, branding communications, and global entertainment initiatives for brands that exceed both client and corporate objectives. Her proven track record of success with client management, business development, organic client growth, retention, and innovative partnership models is incredible. She was nominated for PR Week's 2019 Outstanding Marketer Award, and Shirley is an inspiring leader with a proven background in directing and developing cross-functional and global teams and process to deliver against client and organizational goals, all the while cultivating healthy and progressive culture that drives team development and retention. Now, that may sound like a lot of stuff, but trust me, this is what Shirley deals with every day. I'm really excited to delve into this conversation, Shirley, because, I know what you do on a daily basis. I may not be there in your office, but as a friend and a colleague, I bear witness to so much of what you juggle, and we've all been juggling a lot over the last few years. So thank you for being here today.
Well, first of all, thank you, Kathi. Again, really great to be here, and thanks to all of you for joining. You've created such a special place for people in these chats, and obviously not only live, but for the people that listen in. So I'm really honored to be here and to have the conversation with you that maybe we would also maybe have had over a cocktail or a bite to eat.
Most definitely.
along the way. So thank you again. It's an honor to be here, and thank you all for joining.
That's great. So, as many of you know, I love to start my virtual chat events with a reading from my book. I decided I was sort of toying with whether or not today to do it, because I know there's a lot of ground to cover. But I found something that felt so appropriate that adds to this conversation as kind of a wonderful entree, because it speaks to change in our life, something that we've all been dealing with lately. And the conversation really centers around the changes that we're dealing with and how we're adapting and managing and really kind of moving through them in all different areas of our lives. So I'm going to read something very brief from chapter 3. It's under the subheading of change, fear, or adventure. In my life, change was always an adventure. Throughout my childhood, we moved to 3 different countries and had to start over in new neighborhoods and with new friends, schools, and surroundings. I loved it, and I took on each move with curiosity, a sense of exploration, and an interest to build the next place in my life. It gave me the tools to appreciate new things and get to know something or someone from the beginning. I was a student of the world and exposed to all the diversities of life, races, religions, classes. It's the fabric of me, all woven together. When tackling a new project, client, hobby, friendship, I embrace it with this attitude. Not everyone has the same feeling about change and reinvention, though. The unknown can be a little daunting, but I encourage you to look at the rewards, the upside, and the potential outcome. Take baby steps to get there. Huge leaps aren't necessary. If you're just procrastinating, try to not let your to-dos get in the way of your what-ifs. Spread your wings and embrace the beauty and excitement of newness. If you find something you love to do with the same sense of wonder and exploration you experienced as a kid, You'll love what you do with your life. Take it from someone who knows after 30 years of loving what I do, I'm still reinventing every day. So, just a little excerpt from my book. If you don't know, Reinvent Your Life. What are you waiting for? I just felt like this topic of change is just, and I think you said it before, Shirley, one thing is a constant in our world, change.
Yeah,
Right?
definitely. Absolutely. I think more now than ever. And I like change. Not everybody does, but change brings a lot of stress as well. And when running an organization, especially because not everybody has the same level of excitement about change, to your point. And so it's definitely something that we talk about every day as the world around us is changing and how we adapt to that as an organization and as leaders.
So that is such an incredible segue. But before we go into the current workplace, your life since you were a little girl has been full of changes. And if we had more time, we'd probably go deep, deep back into it. I love to always find out, like, who was little Shirley, and do you find yourself looking at who you are today, and are there, breadcrumbs that you kind of dropped along the way that made you realize that you're exactly where you thought you would be? It's always fun to kind of take a little moment and look at that.
Yeah, well, she surprised me with this one, ladies and gentlemen. No, listen, I think you maybe talked about this before. I'm a firm believer that, and at least for me in my career and in my life, everything has been building up to the next. I, was very shy as a young girl, and even through high school, very shy, and never felt like I quite fit in, but had to find my way a little bit later. I think I would also call myself a little bit of a late bloomer, but also was very curious, and I knew I wanted to know what was out in the world. I grew up in a very small town in North Dakota, and really curious about what was out there. So when I had the opportunity, in my late 20s, to move to Los Angeles, I did it. Sort of sight unseen, as they say, and went. We were just talking about this today. I'm in a women's leadership network here at IPG and talking about the Day of the Girl in October. And if that's something that we want to rally around. And as this group of women that we're talking today, how do we celebrate that little girl, right? And how do we celebrate how she got us from here, from there to here, and what she did for us along the way, to appreciate that. So it was sort of an interesting thing that you brought it up today in this way, because I was just talking about this and how we help young girls and women realize that the potential that they have and give them the tools that they need. So,
well,
anyway.
On that note, I'm going to ask you a question that I probably would have asked you a little bit later on in the interview, but I think you've just given me the perfect segue. And that is that, what advice would you give that little girl that you were? Because I think that informs so much of our life, to understand, the voice that we have or don't have.
Yeah. I mean, for me, everybody's, journey is different. It would be to not be so scared, right? And to be a little bit more adventurous sooner in life than I was. And that's okay. It's worked out really, really well. One of my favorite Peloton instructors brought this up on a ride. Yes, you can find me, big_Shirls. I'm there. But she brought this up, and she's like, I wouldn't give any advice to my younger self because she got me here. And I thought that was such a profound statement. Like, we can't go back and change anything. And I was like, oh, she's right. Like, little Shirley did okay. And so, not without challenges like everybody's life, but because again, we all have a different journey. But I think for me, it would be, don't be so scared, and, be a little bit more risk taking, but it's fine. Everything has happened the way it's supposed to happen for me.
I love that.
No regrets.
That's great. I mean, and look, you're now center of an important and very exciting company. You have a lot of responsibilities from a management standpoint. How are you finding the workplace today? We talk about corporate culture and this new hybrid environment, and our teams working from home part of the time, being in the office part of the time. Let's talk a little bit about, the impact of this, and how's that for you as a leader? How is that for your team? Share a little bit about what you're managing and dealing with every day.
Yeah, it's a lot. I think you and I did this about a year ago, maybe a
Yeah.
little bit longer,
Yes,
and
we did.
we were still at home, right? And we had learned that we could all adapt, and we were managing our businesses and our teams, and we were making it work, and we had to change to do that again. Now being back, I think what we've realized is what we were missing when we weren't together, at least part of the time. So part of the learning that we're doing is what we were missing with managing our teams day in and day out, and teaching them the skills that they need, especially at the junior level, not being around people and what that impacts young professionals when they don't sit next to somebody or have people at the ready to ask questions, because when the screen goes dark, you're by yourself.
So
So
true.
what does that mean in helping those folks? What new leadership is like now in this the world that we're in, that is undoubtedly going to continue to change very fast. I don't see it slowing down, Eddie, especially with the pace at which the workplace and the talent are changing seats and where they're working and where they're going. So we have to continue to adapt to that. So it's a lot. And every day, there's something that I'm like, I never thought I'd hear that. Or,
Can you give examples of, the types of things that you think are
I
different but acceptable? And maybe people are compensating in different ways. And are we having to be more forgiving of that and allow the space for this new norm and how people are functioning if they're really performing?
So I think, yes. I mean, one of the things, again, everybody's organization is different. Everybody's philosophy is different. You have to do what's right for your team and your organization, or at least try your best. I think we have found that we have to give our team space. They're on or in meetings more than they ever were. Right? There's some stats that the new norm is 9 to 10 and not 9 to 5, and so everybody's doing so much more. And we have to let people shut off their cameras. We have to let people go deal with whatever they need to deal with in their personal life, and it's okay. And I use this as an example. I actually had somebody who relocated, high performer on the team relocated, and we were talking about it, like, how are you doing? How are you fitting in? Find meeting people. And she's like, yeah, I'm taking an art class on Tuesdays at 10. I'm like,
10
Tuesdays at
a.m. We're
10,
talking 10
10
a.m.
a.m.
in the
I'm like,
middle of a
Tuesdays at
workday.
10.
Yeah.
And I'm like, what? Good for you. She's really great, a member of our team, and over delivers. And I think we just have to rethink what's normal a little bit right now. And again, assuming that we're able to get our work done and get our for our clients and help our teams grow. And we just have to rethink that. I think it's also a little bit generational, right? I'm a different generation, and some of the folks that we have on the team, but I'm trying to be really open-minded and give people what they need and listen. I think you and I've talked about this. Listening is super important, and people will tell you what they need if you listen.
Yeah. Well, and I think that goes hand in hand with allowing people the space to have a voice, because not everybody will walk into your office. They're not around all the time, and you may not have as many of those spontaneous moments to hear some of that if you're not in a working environment together as often, because you're almost there for a certain amount of time. You got to do what you got to do. So that 5 day a week, 9 to 6, meandering down the hallway, standing around in a kitchen, walking around, you may not catch that. So I think you also have to invite your team to have a voice, let them know it's okay, and create the space for it. And then, to your point, to be able to listen and to be able to really, know what to do with it. And I think, look, as leaders, I think we're put in a position where we're trying to find that balance, the mental health. I mean, the impact of what has happened to people, and I know you and I have talked about just, the staggering statistics around the impact of mental health, but finding that balance of helping people find their place right now is super important.
It is really important. And I think it's not only each person's mental health challenges, but it's also the parents, the caregivers, all the bit they're helping people in their family at the same time. It all stacks up. And, and how that affects people in the workplace, and how they show up and what they need as well. Because everybody's struggling with this. It's not just me individually, my husband or my parents or whatever it might be. So it's really been interesting as we've watched, especially parents on our teams and everything that they're dealing with. Because some of those dynamics have changed. Kids going back to school, that's created a whole nother sort of dynamic as well for parents, where they just got used to having kids at home and now they're going back into angst and all those things. So it's so multidimensional. Like there's not really one piece of it, which makes it even harder. Because again, it constantly is changing, and where people are living at, I have a global team, what the situation is in each of those cities or those offices, or a lot of people working remotely because we've said, sure, you can work from anywhere. And the dynamic of that as well. One of the things that's been really fun though for me to see as people have come back to the office, and we are in a hybrid environment, is to see that magic that's been missing, with people just being together.
Right.
And it's been really fun to see that happen. And people want to be around that, right? And what that's done even for collaboration and having clients back in the office, and just all of that. The team is embraced, and again, everybody's different in what they need to feel fulfilled and like to help them. But it's been really fun watching that. And as we continue to go and more people come in, and we start to be more organized about teams on certain days, or having some all agency meetings, we'll started to do those sorts of things as we've just gotten back. But it's been really fun watching people celebrate being with each other again. It's been really,
So
really
are you finding
rewarding.
Are you finding that you're putting new processes in place to manage this, who's in today, who's in tomorrow? How do we get the teams to collaborate? How do you not sort of silo, or perhaps silo? What happens to these kind of verticals within a company? What's the dynamic, both for you and what you're dealing with, and just generally that you're seeing with clients and companies and others that we're talking to? I mean, that can really affect, how you're onboarding new talent, or how teams are working together.
So a little bit of a complicated question. So people that don't know, we are an integrated marketing agency, rooted in PR, but do everything from brand experience to talent and influencer, content partnerships, television and film works. We do a lot of different things, and we have a lot of different clients. As an agency, you're in the service industry. And so what hasn't changed is that, we are here for our clients and how we actually deliver for them. That hasn't changed before the pandemic, during the pandemic, or after the pandemic. That's how we stay in business. So how we succeed in that, again, and how we manage those teams all throughout that process. Every team's different. And while we strive to have one culture and really believe in the same things, and have transparency and communication and uniformity with our teams, there are folks that have to operate slightly differently because of the business that they're in, whether they're an experiential team that's building out brand experiences for brands that are interacting with people now that live events are back, to a group that might do PR, and they're very different than where they need to be or how they need to be or show up for a client. Some clients are doing in-person meetings already. So how do we, have those teams, which is great, but how do we have those teams, be in person with those clients? So the teams are slightly different. They also have very different personalities in their teams, and I allow my leaders to do what they need to do to manage their teams and what's right for them.
Right.
As well, all with having the same vision of that we're one company. We want to be together. We want to have some of the similar processes, especially when onboarding, or how we get people into the company, so that their experiences are somewhat the same, because I don't want people to have extremely different experiences in the company either. So something that we're working very closely to make sure that we're doing that. But at the end of the day, also, if the client needs something, that's unfortunately, or fortunately, I should say, kind of also a path or a process that we have to follow, or we create for them, because sometimes they look for us to do that. They're in the same boat we are. We talk to our brand clients all day long. Yeah. The challenges of the people, the mental health issues, the great resignation, all those things that have happened, our clients are facing the same challenges that we are. So Again, it's not like they're looking at us going, what's happening over there, that we're in it together, and we're there to support them as well. So we've had good dialogue with our clients too, which has been really nice.
And I'm sure they appreciate it because everybody is trying to understand, there is no right or wrong. It's about figuring out the landscape and the dynamics that work and how to keep the flow of productivity in business where it needs to be, but keeping people happy. And, there are so many schools of thought. We're having a lot of conversations around this, that we've also got to, at some point, figure out, is this just, a younger generation that's a little more entitled, that feels like, I want to have a voice and listen to me, and I don't want to come into work. And, to some degree, they don't necessarily know better. And what we're finding, and I'm hearing a lot of, is that we've got sort of an opportunity now for people who are older in the workplace to come in with years of history and institutional knowledge of, I feel like we're not aging out now, we're aging in. And I don't know if that's a term. If not, I'm coining it, because I feel like there is truly an opportunity for adult supervision, if you will, given all the moving pieces that we are dealing with now, and bringing in some of this, dare I say, older school thinking of how to run teams, how to run companies, and how to run processes at companies where the history of what worked needs to be morphed, but that can only be done by someone who was there to see it or there to experience it, and then figure out how to adapt it to a new environment. Young people are going to come at it from a different point of view, only from the crack in their head and only from their point of experience. So I think there's a really interesting dynamic, and I don't know if you're seeing it, whether it's within the company, whether it's through other people you're talking to, but I've been hearing this a lot, and hearing that there is an opportunity now for those who are older to come help with a little adult supervision, which is really interesting.
That isn't something I've talked to, many people about, but what I've seen is, again, I think it's when we're building our, Sally says she hopes so. Let's hope so. Yeah. When we're building our teams, I think in teaching managers and leaders, right? We know that certain things come with age, maybe a little more patience, obviously experience, having been through things, right? Yeah. So there's a lot of things that come with experience, not just time, but actually having the ability to make some very important decisions based upon having been there before, not just once, but 50, 60, 100 times, or whatever that number is. And so I think that comes through showing our managers and how that's helpful for that. I'm not just telling them either, right? Yeah. And but also adapting again, to your point, everything's changing. The technology of it all, that's changed. I mean, it's not even that it's 24/7. And what that does to people and puts them on overload as well.
You don't want to cancel it, but I think your worries.
Oh, there we go.
Sorry.
So lost my train of thought. Anyway, so I think it's the fact that we have a really interesting mix of people. There's probably more generations in the workforce now than there ever has been. And how do we get the good out of that, right? The excitement of people coming into the workforce, to people that have been here for 10 years, to folks like myself that have been 20, 25 plus and 30 plus, even more. And how do we mix that together for a really good solution, I think is interesting to me, in creating the right kind of work environment. I love that people want to listen to what we've learned along the way, because I think there's
I wasn't talking about you, honey. You're not old enough to be classified.
Anyway, but I mean, anybody that brings in, any sort of experience at all. I think what's interesting to me about the junior folks that have come into our organization, so incredibly talented, so incredibly excited. But, what we've seen a little bit of, they interned on a computer, right? Some of these newer grads, especially, they didn't have the experience of being in an office and understanding that dynamic, or, it just was different. So how we help teach those folks as well the importance of all those things. There are a lot of companies that are completely virtual. So how they manage that culture is very different than a company like ours that is a service industry that has clients, and collaboration really works best for us, and being together at least somewhat. So it's a super interesting time when you've got all those different dynamics and what that means, and how we listen to our teams and just be transparent. Like, we don't have all the answers either.
Exactly.
You know,
that's such a great point.
We want to work with our teams, but still have process in place, because we have to deliver, and we have to, because, you know,
that's what the clients expect.
And even as an organization, you have to have that. But again, trying to listen about what's important.
Yeah. You know, what's really fun that is happening, and we're seeing this as many people know, there has been an incredible rise in pet ownership over the last 2 years for multiple reasons during COVID, whether it's stress, mental health, companionship, needing someone to cuddle and love, all of the above. And this pet love has created this incredible surge. I think we're talking 23 million households in America. And, you know, that's 1 in every 5 households have acquired a pet in the last 2 years. That's wonderful, but tragically now we are dealing with an issue with people having to go back to work and potentially leaving their pets at home. It's a different environment. They may not have the wherewithal. You know, if you live in an apartment and you don't have a garden with a little back door that they can run out of, like, you know, there are real issues. Are you hearing or seeing any of the conversation around this? And I'm certainly, you know, aware of it because of a business I'm getting into in the premium lifestyle and pet space at the moment. So there's a lot of conversation about what happens to those pets and what happens to the owners, and how receptive is a workplace. And what pressure can we put on landlords and building management to allow for that? Because this is a real world issue now.
There's a lot of dialogue, and we do some work in the space as well. And, you know, we have a lot of little 4-legged friends running around here in our offices, which is great. Fun. And, you know, not tripping over tennis balls and all that sort of thing on some days, but it's fun to have them there. I mean, there's, you know, we've seen, I've just, you know, read articles and seen stuff that companies even offering, you know, pet insurance or daycare for animals and for dogs, and, or training, all those sorts of things. So employers are, you know, I think especially if you're in that industry, you have to consider that. So if you're in the pet or animal industry, I think that's something that there's probably even more support for. But, you know, people, again, have pets for a variety of reasons, but there's a lot of conversation about how people and companies amp up what they're doing for support for people with their pets, which is super interesting. And again, who would have thought, at least in my industry, that we would have, you know, gone really deeper into that, again, not being in that industry, right? It's super interesting. And again, it's funny how even again, because I'm a dog person, but see a dog running down the hallway and just, you light up for a minute,
right? You're like, it's such a healthy moment for all of us. It's really precious.
So there's a lot of conversation. Again, you know, it's interesting how, you know, going deeper in that area from what's important to people from an employee perspective. Just another one of those many things that people are talking about, how to do more.
I mean, look, I had a situation myself with one of our staff who, when we started to come back to the office at the beginning of the year, and I said, who wants to come in 2 days a week? Who wants to come in 3 days? Who wants to come in 4 days? And yes, because of her pet, there was a challenge with her being able to come in certain days. She would need time to start to make the necessary accommodations, but it wasn't going to happen overnight. And my first reaction was, bring the puppy to work. Not a problem. Like, if we can accommodate that, it's a win-win for everybody. And I think that's pretty wonderful. And I think that's where you talk about being open and listening and being accommodating in ways that perhaps 3 years ago we weren't quite, you know, in that same headspace. And I think that is something precious that we've all attained at this point with all that we're dealing with. And we've sort of moved through, I think, some, you know, tough times of how to sort of re-engage in what is this new era and the way we're dealing with things, both on a business level and on a personal level. We're all at different places. Unfortunately, I think we've all realized that we all have to do what's right for us, what we're comfortable with. And I think there are people seeking out jobs that are only ever going to be virtual jobs because they have become very clear in what they want out of their lives. And if that means taking a walk, staying in their yoga pants all day and not getting on a train and commuting an hour into a city, and I mean, God bless them if that's what feels good, right?
Listen, and I also think that the last 2 years, people perspectives have changed, right? And some of the generational of this too, Gen Z, they're not defined by their work. They want more than that, right? It's not, where I was at one point, listen, I was driven, for me professionally, was a big part of my life. And so, and again, everybody's journey is different, but I think it's generational a little bit as well. And I think and I'll use myself as an example, I think you and I, again, have talked about this before, hated working from home, right? When we went, I was like, oh my gosh, what am I going to do? I have to work from home. And now I'm like, you know what? I love what that has given me a little bit to understand, I can still be successful and run a team, etc. I'm back in the office a little bit, but I'm still able to not feel so guilty or have, using an old school sort of, punch the clock kind of mentality. And what that does for me, even as a human being, and or going to take calls, and I'm going to call my friend out on this panel, but going to take calls from her house in an afternoon in a couple of weeks because we're going to have an early dinner, but I can do my calls anywhere. So and being able to do that, I wouldn't have felt right doing that before because of who I am.
Well, we have a very strong work ethic, and it wasn't an environment that allowed for that to be acceptable.
At least not for the most part. I think, again, there was companies that do that, but it's also a mind thing about how you're trained and how, again, different generations. So I think that whatever happened to anybody along the way during being in home for 2 years and what that changed for them, whether they got a pet or, they feel less guilty about not being in the office, or they decided they wanted to completely change their careers, whatever that is. It's a shifting moment, I think, for people, as well as our industry is, even more in flux than it ever has been, at least in the marketing part of what we do, as well as, brands are trying to react to that as well, right? How they react to what people care about, what's important, the industries that have emerged, etc. So again, everybody, I think, has their own journey through that. But as a leader of an organization, how to manage that with your team and keep them motivated, as well as what we do for our clients on the daily, is super interesting.
Yeah. Well, I mean, if anything that punctuates the word reinvention, I would say the last 2 years. I mean, who thought that my book would come out at a time where everybody would be either forced or invited to reinvent some part of their lives? And these conversations are so reflective of personally what we've all been going through, and business-wise what companies have been going through. And I'm delighted that I'm able to sort of really have these incredible conversations with people that are challenging our norm, teaching us to listen to ourselves, teaching companies to really question, who are they? What do they stand for? What is their purpose? How are they connecting with their consumers? How are they really listening to what their guests, their customers really want, and meeting them there? And, this has forced a pause and a reflection moment in our lifetime that we're getting to be a part of that journey. And that's a really exciting thing. It's very dynamic.
It's super interesting that you should say that, because, again, we know that people want to participate in a company, or want to buy from a company, or align with a company that believes in what they believe in, and they have, like-minded, whatever that might be. Even during this moment, as we looked at how we're emerging from this, we are like, what do we stand for? Who are we as a culture? I think there's a lot of that. And even, our new people that come to work for us, like, who is this company, and, all that sort of thing. So there's work around that for everybody, I think, at this moment in time, especially when people are really looking inside themselves, as well as to the people that they're with, or the companies that they align with or work for, or whatever it might be. So, definitely an area that I think, again, as a leader, we look at as a company, and what that means for us and for our employees as well.
So I've got a question for you. You are in a position of leadership and people look to you, they come to you for insights, guidance, all that you do within the organization. Where do you go when you're looking for a bit of that? Are
You?
there? Thank you. Well, I'm just really fun to have a glass of wine with. I know.
It's like anybody else. We have our mentors, we have our confidants, we have, whether that's internally, whether that's externally. I try to read to see what people are saying and thinking about, to think about things differently. Whatever it might be, the golf course, to think about it. It just sort of, my husband, who's in a completely different industry than me, but there's so many things that are similar about what's happening in companies right now in the workforce, and the opinions of, again, the different generations, and how the lack of talent and being able to find the right people. Like, there's so much commonality no matter what industry you're in. So I do, go to those folks that I have in my group, in my pack, to sort of, nobody has this
kind of level answer, set, right?
But level set, talk through it for sure.
I always go to my sister and I go, who am I and what am I doing? Can you remind me?
Then there's that. Yeah, I had the conversation with somebody yesterday. I'm like, I don't know. And she's like, oh, seriously. I'm like, well, we all have those moments.
That. Exactly.
Yeah. Yeah. So again, it's just, our trusted tribe that we have around.
Yeah. And what's the favorite part of what you do every day, or just as a whole, being in the business that you're in? What is it that you really love?
It's the people. It's building teams. It's watching the success of that. I've been really lucky to be a part of some mergers and acquisitions along the way. And what I've loved most about that is taking these really complex organizations and mashing them up, and what that means for the people of it all, and building succession plans for them, working with their teams to get them the right resources. And then the people of the clients. I don't get to do the client work that much anymore, but
do you miss that?
Just some days.
Yeah.
Some days I really do. Some days I'm like, ooh, sorry. I'm glad I'm glad I don't have to. I help my team when they have challenges, obviously. Yeah. But no, I miss that. But I'm a brand geek, so I love learning people's businesses and how they operate in their industries and their sectors.
Yeah.
So for me, that's what's fun about being in an agency, is that it's very dynamic and changes every day, and we work in every industry. So I love that. But it's the people and working with my teams and building a dynamic and successful organization that allows people to thrive is what I always strive for.
I love that.
Working every day.
Well, before we wrap things up, I want to open this up to questions, but for the purpose of the podcast, I'm going to just sign off. So please, nobody go anywhere. I want to thank everybody for being here on the podcast today and joining me with Shirley Hughes for this incredible conversation, and have a wonderful rest of your day and happy reinventing. And for those who are still here, because I just turned off the podcast recording, I'd love to open up our conversation to some Q&A. We've got about 10 minutes. I have to jump a little bit early today. So if anybody would like to share any thoughts, add to our conversation, got any questions that you'd like to ask, I'd love you to raise your hand and unmute your mic. Marvin, why don't you go first? Shirley, you go after Marvin, if you don't mind.
Actually, thanks. Ladies first. Go ahead, Shirley.
Oh, such a gentleman, isn't he? Take him up on it, Shirley. You cannot deny Marvin his gentlemanliness.
Never. Good to see you, my friend. Good to see you, my friend. Well, this has been so enlightening. And something that you brought up in the beginning that just, I'm thinking, COVID put everybody, every generation, every human being on the same even playing field, because none of us in this lifetime have experienced that. Yeah. So even though we come from different generations, I really think it did an interesting thing by putting us all on the same level. How do we move forward? How do we deal with it? How do we move forward? And we found out that we were organically reaching into every generation to pull out what they knew best to kind of, in fight or flight mode, figure it out. I think it was kind of a beautiful collaboration. It's interesting how moving forward, there's still these big gaps. What do we do? How do we do it? I mean, we came together. We figured that out. What are some of the things, Shirley, you're doing with your teams to keep that interaction, collaboration across the generations to move forward? Because that truly, I think, is the magic and the reality, because those of us aging out or aging in, as Kathi said, we're still in the workplace and we all want quality. We all want balance. We all want the good things. We all want to work and still have a good life. So what are some of the things you might be suggesting or recommending your teams do to maintain that collaborative idea?
So first, I just want to comment on the humanization of all this, right? And what that's really done to all of us, at least in my opinion. Again, now it's just a sidebar really quickly. It's funny how I'm in the entertainment industry, but events are back, right? Music is back, everything's back. And remember the first concert I went to, and the artist was speaking, and they're like, yeah, well, when we all went home during COVID and I learned how to bake pies. And I'm like, oh my God, they're the same as us, right? Like, to your point, like whoever you are, saying we all were home and we had to deal with this new reality of what this was. And I think that humanized it a little bit. And again, there was no difference other than maybe a zip code or, whatever it might be. So that was super interesting for me. And I went, oh yeah, that's right. They didn't get to go anywhere either. So interesting. I think, listen, it's very hard because you're still not home. I have an organization that has different divisions. So that creates silos, right? We have different levels, which is hard. We have found that we need to communicate more than ever. We need to, because it's harder to listen now than it ever is, because if you're on the screen and you're off camera, or even if you're on camera, you have 5 other things happening no matter what. Whether it's a phone or another computer or a TV, because we're in the PR industry and we're watching the hottest news that's happening, or a kid that's tugging at your belt loop, whatever it might be, that it's very hard to stay focused and concentrated. And that is, to me, it doesn't matter what generation you are, everybody's got that same situation. The meeting creep that we've talked about, burnout, like the days are getting longer and longer and longer. And doesn't matter what age you are, whether, again, you're myself as a president or an AAE that's new here, the days are getting longer and the work is still there and is more and more all the time. So I think we just try to communicate to people, even from that human level, that like, we're all in this, right? We're going to shut your camera off on these days. The little things, it's not easy. And I think that being together somewhat in the office helps a little bit, but there's some people that have, really not come in yet. So I do think it's about communication, doing more one-on-one check-ins with people. I even do more of that than I ever did, even into the more junior level. I say, I welcome every new starter in my organization, whether they're an AAE or a VP, just to have some face time. I think it's just about communication, keeping people grounded and bound together somehow, whatever that is. And again, helps the humanization of it all. It helps people to learn. I don't have an answer, Shirley. I just think it's, every day it's just, again, about, okay, we're being in touch and making sure that we aren't forgetting.
Yeah, I was going to say being conscious of it and not being in autopilot. I think we were all very in autopilot. And this is the way it is, and this is the way it's done. And now we have a different level of awareness of all of this. And that's really important.
Yeah.
Right.
Thank you.
Thanks, Shirley. Marvin?
Yes, thanks, Kathi. Surely appreciate your wisdom and your insight. And it's good to see so many good friends and so many new friends. And Kathy's great at bringing us all together and putting this on our calendar. My question's a little different. Coming from a town where basically your population is almost 1/3 of your staff or your company, how does North Dakota Shirley bring something very unique to obviously a very large brand and a global company that's very well known? And how do you see the intersection, and what unique asset do you feel is a value to you coming from there?
Marvin Nelson from North Dakota. Wow. Listen, I will say it's my work ethic, right? I grew up, just the work ethic that I believe the Midwest gives you, and not that if you're not from the Midwest, you don't have it, but that was what was instilled in me in a small town. I also knew everybody, right? So nobody was a stranger. So, and I also learned to be a chameleon. For me, it was really important. And going through college where I worked a lot, another small school, I have realized for me that I was, whether I was bartending or working at a furniture store, or I was whatever I was doing along the way, working in an office on campus, I learned to be a chameleon. And I think that's because I've learned to be around so many different types of people, but also had commonality. So for me, that's what I think I brought, was a small town sensibility, but again, the work ethic, not afraid to roll up my sleeves in a big organization, and I raised my hand. It's a little bit of who I am as a person. But I think, I knew everybody. And so not knowing people is hard for me. So I try to get to know people as much now. Again, I was very shy, but again, as I got out of my shyness, but it's also intimidating going, I come from this small town or this other place, I had to really work on my own self-esteem a little bit to feel like I had a place here as I worked my way up in the industry and into this role. But for me, it's the work ethic and again, being able to sort of, I can talk to anybody, and whether it's a CEO of a company or it's, whoever, I don't have an issue talking to anybody and finding a commonality of some sort.
Thank you.
Love that. Thanks, Marvin. Cindy, go for it.
Thanks so much. I just had a question because you're dealing with so many brands. And are you seeing any brands in particular trying to respond to the recovery and the economic impact it's having?
All of them. I mean, everybody has a different, it has a different situation depending on their sector, depending on their brand, depending on how they're new or old. I mean, they're all having to respond to what's happening, either from even now supply chain issues, right, that they're all dealing with, that we didn't think that, in the beginning wasn't going to be an issue. So all of the brands are having to really think about very strategically where they're at in their journey. We help them with that, whether it's how they show up in an experience, to how they talk about their brand from an awareness perspective, to the type of influencers that they use or that they tap into and market with, to the types of sponsorships, or even the comms work that we do, and also a lot of diversity conversations that we do on behalf of our clients with our multicultural team as they're marketing to all the diverse audiences. So everybody, no matter what brand, is having to respond to the way the world is changing. And think about all of the industries that really weren't where they are today before COVID, right? Now, whether that's a result of COVID or otherwise, the growth in gaming, the growth in crypto, the growth in, all those other things that have happened over the past 2.5 years, the metaverse. Every brand is looking at, or should be looking at, those things and how they affect them in their sector and their consumers, because again, consumers have multiple passion points as well. So it's all of them, all of them.
It's so dynamic. I keep saying it's an amazing time for us to be in the business we're both in, because I feel like our clients really need to listen to what we're saying and work together with us to create and affect impact, change, reinvention, evolution. I mean, more than ever before, everybody's leaning into this, trying to figure it out. Status quo is not okay anymore. And that's a really exciting time for people in the business that Shirley and I are in, and some of us others on this call, because it is a breeding ground for opportunity and cultivating conversation around everything that we're trying to do to affect and accelerate their brands and their businesses. And, I think in a lot of ways for people in other businesses, I mean, to look at it through that lens and say, wow, this is, just another time in our history where things are going to move to another place because of what we have dealt with. And that's a pretty precious moment that, 3 years ago, we were like going, oh, where's there going to be opportunity? And yeah, there's technology and crypto's come up, but what about everything else? And I think we're really seeing that if we lean into it, if we open our eyes, if we look around, if we're open-minded, we can find those opportunities. Mia, yeah, I'm going to ask that Mia be the last question, guys. I'm so sorry because I have to run out to a meeting, but go for it, Mia.
Okay, thank you. And I apologize for not being on. I know that's so rude, but I'm getting my hair colored, so I'm just happy to be here.
No worries,
And
go
trust
for
me,
it.
I don't want to see this. And I'm sure you ladies know what I'm talking about.
Good for you.
Anyway,
Yep.
thanks. Fitting in that self-care. What I wanted to say is her last comment just really made me think about my parenting book that I'm writing, because obviously we all have our own bias, right? And I've been thinking lately as I'm traveling more around the country and realizing that, this book has my sort of bias on it. And as I'm going back through before I send it off to the editor, trying to be careful of things that sound, and I don't think I had a privileged life in any way, very lower middle class on my mom's side, but my dad was wealthy. So it was like very interesting growing up on both sides. But still, I feel like there's things that show privilege in a way that I didn't even realize. So I'm trying to be super careful. And even the cover, which Kathi, I've shown it to you, the hands holding the heart,
Yep.
the cover I love. And I'm hoping that the hands, like, they're not too white, but they're not too dark. So I'm just curious, what do you think in the whole marketing scheme about that in terms of a cover and what someone might think of even the color of someone's hands and what it might represent?
I don't know if you're asking myself or Kathi, but this is actually work that we consult brands on all day long. How to show up in the right way for that purpose. And again, depending upon if it's a book or it's a toy or whatever it might be, or a beauty product, right? So it is a moment to think about, and try to do your best with best intentions, to your point about bias and understanding what you might have and how you can, again, navigate that to your best intention. But it is to be thoughtful about it is super important as well. So I applaud you for that.
And be authentic at the same time.
Yeah,
like
exactly.
you can't, you don't want to pretend to be something that you're not, or do it for the wrong reasons. But I think you said it best, Mia. You've got to find that balance. And the fact that you're mindful of it in the first place is a great start, right? And I know we're really excited for that and what you have coming out. We'll have to keep close to that. I want to thank all of you for being here today. I miss those of you that I don't see on a weekly basis. I think we're going to have to revisit that situation. Shirley, love you to pieces. Love this conversation. So appreciate just our ability to connect and have grown up adult conversations about, what we're really all moving through. These are, sign of the times and where we're all at. And no matter where we are, what we're doing, what station in life we are at, all of this affects us in so many different ways. And I just really appreciate you opening up, and the team behind you that just, give you the chance to be who you are every day.
Thank you. I appreciate it. And thank you for all joining. And again, thank you for sharing your platform with me. And I know there's a lot more folks that will get to see this content after this as well, and appreciate that. And to all you lovely people, thank you for taking the time out of your day. I appreciate it.
All right. Thank you, everybody. Have a beautiful rest of the day. Happy reinventing.